Imagine you inherit the world. Your father, Cyrus the Great, just forged the largest empire humanity had ever seen, the first global superpower. Now, it's yours to rule. But from the moment you take the throne, you're surrounded. A rival kingdom in Africa defies you. Famine threatens to tear your empire apart from within. And the most dangerous threat of all might just be your own brother. This is the story of the forgotten king who pushed the Persian Empire to its limits and risked everything, only to have his legacy buried by the man who came after him. This is the untold story of Cambyses II. How are you, dear friends? I am Zar. We uncover the truth from our history. If you are passionate about it, have a look at our series of French, Byzantine, and Persian Empire in playlist. We love your support to improve our service by subscribing, sharing, liking, and especially comments to keep us going and serve you better. The impossible inheritance of Cambyses II was a pain. Let us understand it. How? To understand Cambyses II, you first have to understand the man whose shadow he could never escape. His father, Cyrus the Great. Cyrus was a legend, a unifier who took a divided land and forged the mighty Achaemenid Persian Empire. By 530 BCE, this was the largest, most powerful, and most diverse state on the planet. It was the world's first true superpower, and Cambyses, as Cyrus's eldest son, was set to inherit it all. This wasn't a simple birthright, it was a burden of impossible expectations. Cambyses wasn't a novice, he'd been groomed for this. For years, he served as governor of the critical province of Babylon, learning the complex art of running a multicultural empire. When his father embarked on his final, fatal campaign, he even appointed Cambyses as co-ruler, trusting him with the heart of the empire. So, when news arrived in 530 BCE that Cyrus had fallen in battle, the transition of power was, on the surface, seamless. Cambyses II took the throne without any recorded opposition, becoming the sole master of a global power. But this stability was a fragile illusion. The empire was held together by military might, religious tolerance, and Cyrus's own immense charisma. Cambyses had the army, and he could adopt the policies, but could anyone truly replace Cyrus the Great? The early signs were troubling. A famine gripped the vital region of Babylonia for 2 years, a devastating omen for a new king. In an age when the health of the land was seen as a reflection of divine favor, whispers would have spread. Maybe the gods didn't approve of the new King of Kings. And then there was the matter of family. In ancient courts, the biggest threat often came from those who shared your blood. Cambyses had a younger brother, Bardia, known to the Greeks as Smerdis. The official story, at least the one written later, claims that Cambyses, consumed by paranoia, had his own brother secretly murdered to eliminate any rival to the throne. It was a dark, brutal act that, whether it truly happened or was a story invented later, would hang over his entire reign. Despite this grim reputation, administrative records from the time paint a very different picture. Contemporary Babylonian tablets show a functioning government and a smooth-running empire, suggesting Cambyses was not a neglectful ruler, but a man in firm control. He was a king caught between the legend of his father, whispers of divine disapproval, and the threat of betrayal. He knew that to secure his legacy, he couldn't just maintain the empire. He had to expand it. He had to achieve something even Cyrus had only dreamed of. He had to conquer Egypt. Dear fellows, he was known as the first Persian pharaoh. The conquest of Egypt was more than just a campaign. It was the unfinished business of the empire. Cyrus himself had planned it, seeing Egypt as the last great rival to Persian power. For Cambyses, it was a strategic necessity, and, allegedly, a personal obsession fueled by a diplomatic insult. The story, passed down by the Greek historian Herodotus, is one of royal deceit. Cambyses had requested the hand of the daughter of the pharaoh, Amasis II. Amasis, not wanting to send his own child to a foreign court, sent the daughter of the previous pharaoh instead, claiming she was his own. When the ruse was revealed, Cambyses was furious. He saw it as an intolerable affront to the majesty of Persia. Egypt had mocked the King of Kings. It would pay the price. Personal vendettas aside, the strategic logic was solid. Egypt was ancient, proud, and fabulously wealthy. By 526 BCE, the perfect opportunity arose. Pharaoh Amasis died, leaving the throne to his inexperienced son, Psamtik III. Egypt was vulnerable, and Cambyses was ready. His preparations were a masterclass in grand strategy. He commanded the construction of the first-ever Persian navy by conscripting expert sailors from his Phoenician and Greek subjects. He secured the allegiance of key figures, like the powerful Greek tyrant Polycrates of Samos, and a defecting mercenary commander named Phanes, who brought priceless military intelligence with him. Most critically, he made a deal with the Arab chieftains who controlled the Sinai Desert, who provided a steady supply of water for his massive army. With his supply lines secure, Cambyses launched his invasion in 525 BCE. The final showdown came at the fortified city of Pelusium. Here, one of the strangest episodes in ancient warfare supposedly unfolded. A later writer claims that Cambyses, knowing the Egyptians held animals sacred, ordered his troops to place cats, dogs, and sheep at the front of their lines. The Egyptian soldiers, horrified at the prospect of harming these sacred creatures, were thrown into chaos, their defenses rendered useless. While modern historians seriously doubt the truth of this cat strategy, the battle's outcome is undisputed. The Egyptians were routed. Psamtik III fled to Memphis, but the city soon fell. By the summer of 525 BCE, the entirety of Egypt, a civilization that had endured for 3 millennia, belonged to a Persian king. Cambyses had himself officially crowned as pharaoh, adopting the throne name Mesuti-Re, or offspring of Ra. He presented himself as the legitimate successor, just as his father had in Babylon. But this is where the historical accounts violently diverge. Greek and later Egyptian sources paint a picture of a man descending into madness. They tell of a king who mocked their religion and, in an act of supreme sacrilege, plunged a dagger into the sacred Apis bull, a living god. Yet, contemporary evidence suggests a much more complicated reality. Archaeological findings show that most Egyptian officials worked with the new Persian administration and that Cambyses made offerings to the gods. The very sarcophagus of the Apis bull that died during his reign bears an inscription saying Cambyses honored it with a proper burial. The story of him stabbing the bull was likely propaganda. So was Cambyses a pragmatic new pharaoh, or a tyrant spiraling into madness? It was in Egypt that the legend of Cambyses the Mad King was born, a legend that would follow him to his grave and beyond. The worst scenario of his reign, dear fellows, was the lost army and the failed campaigns. With Egypt in his grasp, Cambyses' ambitions swelled. The Libyan tribes and Greek city-states on the coast quickly submitted, expanding his African domain without a fight. But for a man trying to outshine Cyrus the Great, this wasn't enough. He planned a breathtaking, three-pronged assault to conquer the rest of North Africa. one against the naval power of Carthage, one against the oracle of Ammon at the Siwa oasis, and a full-scale invasion of the kingdom of Kush in Nubia. It unraveled from the start. The campaign against Carthage was dead on arrival. His Phoenician sailors flatly refused to attack their Carthaginian kin, and without his navy, Cambyses was powerless. Undeterred, he personally led his army south to invade Nubia. But the campaign was a disaster. Ill-prepared and poorly supplied, his army ran short of provisions in the harsh terrain and was forced into a humiliating retreat. It was his third expedition, however, that became one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. Around 524 BCE, Cambyses sent 50,000 soldiers from Thebes into the western desert. Their mission: destroy the oracle of Ammon. According to Herodotus, the army marched for 7 days, reached an oasis, and then set out for the final leg of their journey. They were never seen again. Herodotus gives a chilling account. A violent south wind whipped the desert into a frenzy, and a massive sandstorm completely buried the entire army, swallowing 50,000 men without a trace. For centuries, many dismissed this story as a myth, but another compelling theory suggests the army wasn't lost to a storm at all, but was ambushed and destroyed by the forces of an Egyptian rebel pharaoh named Petubastis III. According to this theory, the story of the sandstorm was a brilliant piece of propaganda invented by Cambyses' successor, Darius the Great, to cover up a humiliating military defeat. Whatever their fate, the loss of 50,000 soldiers was a catastrophe. The failed campaigns were devastating blows to Cambyses' prestige. Back in Persia, news of these failures would have spread like wildfire. The king who had conquered Egypt now looked weak, and his grip on the empire was beginning to slip. Conspiracy. The ghost on the throne, dear fellows, as always, he had challenges at home as well, while being away from his throne. In the spring of 522 BCE, as Cambyses was still in Egypt, shocking news arrived. A rebellion had erupted back home. But the man who had seized the throne claimed to be someone who should have been dead: Bardia, the king's own brother. According to the official history carved in stone by Darius the Great, Cambyses had ordered Bardia's secret murder years earlier. The people, unaware of the assassination, had grown tired of Cambyses' long absence. A priest named Gaumata, who bore a striking resemblance to the dead prince, declared himself to be Bardia, the true son of Cyrus, and the empire flocked to his banner. Cambyses was faced with a ghost on the throne. He immediately gathered his army to march back and crush the usurper. But he would never get the chance. His journey home ended abruptly and mysteriously in Syria. The most common story, from Herodotus, is that as he was mounting his horse, the cap fell off his dagger's sheath, and the blade gashed him in the thigh. The wound became gangrenous, and the King of Kings died far from home. Herodotus, loving the irony, notes the wound was in the same spot where he had allegedly stabbed the sacred Apis bull, portraying his death as divine payback. Darius, in his official inscription, simply states that Cambyses died his own death, a deliberately vague phrase. But the timing was just a little too perfect. A king racing to put down a popular rebellion dies from a freak accident? It raises suspicion. Did he take his own life? Or was there a more sinister hand at play? One of the men in Cambyses' inner circle on this final journey was his personal lance-bearer, a nobleman named Darius. With Cambyses dead, the path to the throne was suddenly much clearer. The man known as Bardia, whether the real prince or an impostor, ruled for several months. His reign was cut short when a conspiracy of 7 Persian noblemen, led by none other than Darius, stormed the palace and assassinated him. With the direct line of Cyrus the Great now extinguished, Darius, the ambitious lance-bearer, declared himself the new King of Kings. We'll never know for sure, but the man who would write the final story of Cambyses was now on the throne. Let us talk about his so-called legacy of a shadow king. Cambyses II reigned for less than a decade, but his story has come down to us as a political assassination in literary form. It was written almost entirely by 2 hostile sources: the Greek historian Herodotus, who saw him as a mad despot, and his own successor, Darius the Great, who had every reason to paint him as a failure. To legitimize his own seizure of the throne, Darius needed to delegitimize everyone else. On the massive Behistun inscription, a relief carved into a mountainside, Darius laid out his version of events. A mad Cambyses murders his brother, loses control of the empire, and dies shamefully, leaving the heroic Darius to save the day. It was a masterpiece of political propaganda, and it worked. The image of Cambyses the Mad King was set in stone. But if we strip away the propaganda, a more capable figure emerges. His conquest of Egypt was a feat of military genius, an achievement his legendary father had planned, but never realized. By bringing the kingdom of the Nile into the empire, he eliminated Persia's last great rival and secured its dominance for the next 200 years. He was also an effective administrator whose government ran smoothly, even during his long absence. Cambyses was a ruler of boundless ambition, but he overreached. His failed campaigns were catastrophic blunders that damaged his prestige and opened the door for rebellion. He was a conqueror, not a unifier like his father. He ruled through force, and when his military aura began to fade, his authority crumbled. He remains a shadow king, trapped between the towering legacy of his father, Cyrus, and the brilliant self-serving propaganda of his successor, Darius. He was the man who inherited the first superpower, expanded it into Africa, and then lost it all in a storm of military failure, rebellion, and his own mysterious death. While he ruled the known world, his true story is a casualty of history, written by the victor. The rise of Darius the Great, from a royal bodyguard to the King of Kings, is one of the most dramatic stories of political intrigue in the ancient world. But the story of how he seized power and the monumental inscription he carved into a cliffside to justify it is a story for another time.